Oh, welcome aboard. Got a cup of coffee for this one. Well, we all know why you're here. So without further ado, okay, I'll give the introduction. I'm CK Burch, and this is my geek review of Iron Man 3. And I just had a great fucking time at the movie theater. Not without a few quibbles, clearly. The film has a few things that make you go, oh, well. But at the same time, the damn thing is fun. It's fun. It's fucking fun. And it gives us a lot more of the man behind the iron shell, Tony Stark. This is the film that Iron Man 2 should have been. Iron Man 2 was a fucking mess. A total ball of fuck. And it was just shit. Let me back up a little bit here. Marvel's films post Iron Man were not altogether very even. You had the Ed Norton Hulk film, which it was awful. It starts out so good, and every time I rewatch it, I'm always immediately reminded of how bad it's going to get, and I feel incredibly sad. So you had the Ed Norton Hulk film. Then you had Iron Man 2, which is a ball of fuck. Thor started getting things better, but it was really boring and uninteresting outside of Asgard because the visuals weren't as interesting or able to hold much, and the plot, the story was really weak. So, I mean, we got good performances. Loki was great, Thor was great, but overall as a movie, it was decidedly average. Captain America was a great film for the first half of it, and then somehow in the second half, it just... I think, man, it lost all the tone and it lost everything that made it an incredible film in the first half. So I really wasn't feeling Marvel's attempts at getting everything lined up for a little bit there. Then we got hit with the Avengers, which I went in with like zero expectations, came out with a giant-ass smile on my face. And so, with much trepidation, I walked into Iron Man 3 after hearing a lot of critical accolades, shall we say, but then some other people that I know saying, it was alright, it was kind of boring, and I was like, wow, I'm kind of getting a few mixed thoughts here, I'm not really sure where to go, but I can tell you, from my perspective, this film was fucking awesome. Oh. Alright, so, I'm going to try and make this as spoiler-free as possible, since it's opening weekend, I want people to go see it, because this film is worth seeing on the big screen. I didn't go and see it in IMAX, and now I'm wishing I had, because there's a couple of sequences where oh my god, I wish I had seen it in IMAX. But to begin with, I'm glad that Tony Stark is still retaining his signature dickishness. That was much needed. Robert Downey Jr. knows how to bring the dickishness of Tony Stark out and have it be charming all at the same time. We got a great flashback in the very beginning to vintage Tony Stark, pre-shrapnel in the chest, where he's still like huge, massive cock, and Robert Downey Jr. totally plays that up, and it's a great scene. Also, this isn't a spoiler because the film opens with this, but when was the last time you heard Blue by Eiffel 65? Yeah, years ago, right? We're going to hear it again when this film starts off, and it fucking... it's amazing what 13 years can do to a song, you know? It's like, all of a sudden the song sounds great, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's why this song was a huge hit, because it sounds great. Now, have the film start off with that is brilliant, because it perfectly sets up, you know, the opening of the film, which is set in 1999. Few things happen to set up the later on in the film, and then we're treated to some stuff about there's a terrorist in the Middle East called the Mandarin. He is making personal attacks on American soil, and so it's like it's very it can hit a little close to home as far as like the whole war on terror thing, but overall I feel like the entirety of the plot surrounding the Mandarin and what he's doing in this whole war on terror thing is handled very well because it's very personal, it's very aimed, and then Tony is pulled into it. He's swept up into this because it's made very personal to him, and I won't say why, but overall, the whole war on terror thing I think felt really good for the film, especially the little twist near the end. It's one of those things where okay, you can kind of see it coming. It's not like they don't telegraph it at all. I think the things that they tried harder to do as far as like revelations and plot twists is that the little micro twists where it's like the turning of the screws here and there to kind of like make you go and like make the storyline kind of fold the way they want it to tell. Those are more important than the big revelation because it's not exactly like you don't go it's hard to put it because it's like this plot twist, but at the same time you kind of see it coming, but you don't really see it coming the way it happens. And I liked it. It felt very natural and it felt very entertaining. The story itself is very cohesive, which is something that previous Marvel films have not really had. There are a few leaps in logic that I felt were kind of hard to swallow. So the film deals with this, how to call it? It's like a biological enhancement. It's like hacking the human body. It's called Extremis. It was something that originally appeared in the comic books and now is making its way in a different form here into the films, into the film universe. Now, what it does is it apparently turns people, slightly spoilery, so here you go. It turns people into almost kind of irradiated super beings. They can regrow limbs, they can heal fast, they can turn their bodies super hot and melt things. And that's very cool, and it works, especially in the context of the film. It really works, and it makes for great villains, especially the like supercharged villains in the film. However, there were a few quibbles I had with it, in that I never really kind of got the sense at what point these guys could die, like for seriously, because we see them, we see limbs cut off, we see them caught in fiery explosions, and we see them, heal themselves from massive injuries. There's a couple of times where it's like, okay, he's dead, right? And then the film doesn't offer a clear-cut definition of what kills these things, because it can be a little ambiguous, because something that happens to someone, which you think probably didn't kill them, ends up killing them. And then something that would kill another one of these guys, and you think, oh, it could probably regrow from that, they end up dying from it. So it's a little bit of kind of like, suspension of disbelief. You're kind of going to have to just accept when this one dies, it just is. And that was one of the few things that I disliked about the film, is that there's no real, like, okay, so that killed that one. But overall, it works within the film for the most part, so it's forgivable. There's no real, like, explanation or anything like that. It's just kind of like, alright, this one needed to die, so now it is, and that one isn't yet, but maybe later there's something else around. Other quibbles. One of the big plot pieces in the film is that Tony Stark is kind of, it's kind of like a PTSD sort of anxiety left over from the end of the Avengers, where you know, they don't explicitly state why, but they do a really good job of alluding to it because, like, Tony is still trying to figure it out himself. But what it basically is that he has been kind of put in the face of something so much bigger than him, and now well, yeah, okay, I guess they do kind of state it in the film. Tony does, but like he's still kind of trying to get a grasp on like how to deal with it. But like in the Avengers, you got gods and aliens, and Tony's like, all right, like now I'm a guy in a tin suit, and I don't know how to deal with this. So like he can't sleep. He's having really bad anxiety attacks from a mention of New York. So it's like it's a very interesting look at like the anxiety left over from a traumatic incident and like it's sort of like PTSD, if you will. I didn't really like how how that was resolved in the film. It was a little too quick and easy, but at the same time, it makes sense within the character. So like that, I had an easier time swallowing and accepting. I was feeling natural versus like the extremist soldiers and how they like this one died but that one didn't, and whatever. But I mean like overall, that didn't necessarily take away from the film. You know what I mean? It didn't make my experience any lessened. What it did do is it just made me go, well, okay, but I'll just move along with it. And it wasn't anything glaring like Prometheus. It's hard not to just give glowing praise to this film because, oh my god, I was so fucking entertained. There's like 3 major action set pieces. One of them involving Tony's house. One of them involving, man, I don't even want to talk about it because my jaw just dropped. Do you remember that sequence in Superman Returns where he saves the airplane and it's just like this? Oh, that's super tense. It's very much along those lines, and I refuse to say anything else because my jaw was open the entire time. I was absolutely on the edge of my seat during that entire sequence, even though you're like, yeah, he's totally gonna, but at the same time you're like, holy shit, how? God, one of the best filmed, most like adrenaline pumping sequences I've ever seen in a film, and it totally worked for me, and I was just, so good. And then the final sequence comes later on in the film, big action sequence, and it, like sometimes, like the first time I saw the Avengers, there was so much flying around on the screen and so much happening that I totally didn't know where to look. And this kind of starts to edge into that territory, but doesn't really reach so far into it. There's a lot happening in the very final sequence, big battle sequence, but it was focused enough that I felt like I could follow everything along with it, and it really worked for me. It felt like really evenly paced, tense, but at the same time very clear to follow and very entertaining. So all 3 big action set pieces I really love. Aside from mentions and direct references to what happened in the Avengers, we don't see Nick Fury show up. You're not going to see any cameos during the film. Or do you? I'm not going to say. But it's nice to see that this film is very much grounded within itself, but is still very connected to the rest of the universe to the degree that it exists on its own, but it acknowledges that it comes from other places. So I think one of the few quibbles that I had with the Avengers was that if you hadn't seen any of the other Marvel films, then you would have no idea what the fuck was going on at the very beginning of the Avengers. Here in Iron Man, it's telling an Iron Man story that, if you just kind of need to see, either of the other 2 Iron Man films, or even just the Avengers or something, or the first Iron Man. You don't have to have seen Thor, Captain America, all of it. And even the like references to the Avengers, that film pretty much everyone has seen. So it feels very organic, and it's a great standalone film. The dialogue was great, the acting was great. Robert Downey Jr. still fucking owns Tony Stark. you know, I've got my fingers crossed that he's going to be in Avengers 2 because it's not quite confirmed yet, but it's at the degree where it's like pretty much nearly there. So please, Mr. Downey Jr., I know you're not watching this film, but maybe someone will link it to you. Please sign on for Avengers 2. You're just, you are Tony Stark. And at some point, someone else is going to have to take over. And that will be a sad day, and we'll have to learn to get over it. But until that point, Avengers 2 at least. If you don't do Iron Man 4, I totally understand. But the ending of this film is going in a new direction for Tony Stark. It's like, just like it's a brand new leaf. Everything about this film feels like a refreshing revitalization of this character, and your performance is absolutely key to that. And I would love to see you take this in a new direction. So, Avengers 2 at least. If you don't want to do Iron Man 4, don't do it. But I would love to see you come back at least once, if not twice, as Iron Man, because you've got the Tony Stark, and it's everything about this film and your performance is what it just beautiful. I will say one more final quibble about the film, and then I will end this. Is that there is one point in the film where there's kind of a lot happening, where it's like this is going on over here, this is going on over here. It's like there's kind of a time limit on there, and then the film kind of stops for a minute so that Tony can have his like little A-team kind of moment. You know, where they stop and they like go and build the funky contraptions. Tony has enough time to like stop, like go shopping for a bunch of materials in order to create a makeshift Iron Man suit, and then drive to Miami from Tennessee. I had a little bit of a hard time swallowing that, but you know, in the context of the rest of the film, I can ignore that and I can move along with it. I think the best aspect of this film is that it takes Tony out of the Iron Man suit. It allows him to be Tony Stark and not just Iron Man. And it gives us more that sense of him of understanding that he's not just the suit. Because, like, you know, you get that sense. Like, you think of Iron Man, you think of in the suit. You know, much like Nolan's first two Batman films. I'm not going to talk about Dark Knight Rises. But much like Nolan's first two Batman films, we get that sense of Bruce Wayne, the man behind the mask. We still think of Iron Man as being the suit and everything. But in this film, there are so many suits. And we see so much of Tony Stark using his mind and showing how he can overcome obstacles put in his path, even without the reliance on his own technology, even though, you know, he needs it in order to win the day. That is what I think was the best aspect of the film. It's just the fact that it was more of a focus on Tony Stark, the man, and what Tony Stark, the man, can do, and how he he might be a man in a tin suit, but he is still that genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, and that's what he is. But not just that, he is the mechanic, and that plays a big part in this film, and that was one of the things I liked about it. I'm going to give this a solid 8 out of 10. A few minor quibbles, knocked it down a touch. Well, okay, there was a minor quibble, and then the major quibble for me was just like, how do you know when these things are like dead, incapacitated? Is it when their internal organs stop working? Would those not regrow? Like, what? Why? I don't get it. These are the things that I think about when I'm watching these films. But again, it's a solid 8 out of 10. This is the second best Marvel film to date, right behind the Avengers. Shaking the camera. The Avengers still remains the best of the Marvel films, and this one is just right up there with it. So yeah, that's my geek review. Apparently next week. Oh no, yeah, I think it's The Great Gatsby. I kind of want to see that. I'm not entirely sold upon seeing that and doing my geek review, but we're looking at 2 weeks to Star Trek. I am beyond excited for that. I'm going to finish the Star Trek video game in between now and then, and I'm going to do my geek review of that. It will be an interesting one, and I plan on doing like a couple other videos in between now and then, just to kind of like pass the time. But don't. I'm gonna do Star Trek for sure, and that will be in a couple of weeks, and I cannot wait for that. Got my fingers crossed. If I'm hoping it's as good as it looks like it's gonna be. Maybe it won't be. There's always gonna be that possibility, but I can't wait to see it. Anyways, I'm CK Burch. This has been my geek review of Iron Man 3. Check out links in the description. See other stuff that I do, and come find me. And I hope you have a great weekend. Looking forward to more.